Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Tuesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. I know we've been here a couple times, Andy, but one of the biggest games of the season, one of the biggest wins of the season for the Lakers, 101-95 over the Jazz on Martin Luther King Day. But Andy, do not call it a turning point. We'll talk about that and more coming up on Locked On Lakers.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I want to thank everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, and sometimes on Saturdays and Sundays. We get this thing up for you bright and early. So no matter where you get your podcasts, how you get them, when you get them, why you get them, this thing is available for you whenever you need it. So we'll get to talk about Stanley Johnson. We got a little AD news coming out of the game on Monday night, which is obviously important. And has a huge impact on what the Lakers are going to be doing going forward. But let's talk about this game, Andy. Not necessarily a lot of quote-unquote signature wins to choose from this year. But if you're looking for one of the
It's the inverse, Brian, of every time after a bad loss, you say, this feels like the worst loss of the season. Do you agree with me? And I say, I don't know.
The difference is with the bad losses, the problem is I have too many to choose from.
That's what I'm saying. It's the inverse of that.
I see what you mean. Right.
It's the reverse where, like, if I really actually gave this a couple minutes of thought, I might be able to give you a pinpointed answer because I've only got like three choices.
Right.
You know,
but I mean, like, it's funny. Like, people get mad, and there's one guy in particular who gets mad every time, the concept of the signature win comes up. And, we have long said that this is going to be like, there is no turning point. There is no game that's going to, make the 90-degree pivot to where they need to go, or whatever the right geometric term is there. But it was interesting. After they beat the Jazz 101-95, Utah coming into this game 29-14, one of the best teams in the Western Conference and in the league. I think they have the best point differential in the NBA, and they have the best offense in the league. Only the fourth time, I believe, this year the Jazz have been held under 100 points. Despite a big win over an excellent team, everyone, to a man, made sure not to call this a turning point. So even though we've been saying it, Andy, I do think it's significant that the players, Frank Vogel, everyone, when presented a question kind of like that, pump the brakes. No, this isn't one of those turning points. No, we got to put this one away just like we put the losses away and come back and do the next one.
I mean, look, they've been down this road before. Like, they've had a few good wins this season. They had a 4-game winning streak. They have had periods where things seem to at least be moving in a good direction, and then they turn around and they crap the bed. And sometimes they crap the bed inexplicably. Sometimes they crap it in very, very messy fashion. Like, I'm going to take this all the way to the point where you are really visualizing a bed covered in crap.
Is there a neat and tidy way to crap the bed?
I mean,
pile or.
As two people with children, I think we both know no two crapping of the beds are the same.
They're all bad, but some are worse than others. That's
absolutely.
True. That is true.
There are times where, it's just like, all right, we can clean it up, no big deal. There are other times where, like, how did that come out of one small human?
Yeah.
But anyway, before we get too sidetracked,
all that.
the point being, though, I think these guys are now very hyper aware of, the cliches of don't get too high, don't get too low. It's not even because they're veterans. It's not even because they've been around the game a long time. I think they just recognize we have not done this consistently enough where we even know. If you ask them privately, what do you think this means? I think the most common answer might be, I have no effing idea.
No freaking clue.
Yep.
But it was look, the Lakers, there are a lot of things that if you're, are one of these people that, like, guys, I'm tired of this stuff. Look at what happened in this game. Yes, the Lakers offensively were not good. They were under 30% from 3-point range. They shot 61% from the free throw line. They're just terrible at the free throw line. And for a bad offensive team, that can't happen. Utah is, going to look at this and say, sure, the Lakers, they were active offensively. They did a lot of stuff. against even, there's no way we shoot 37% with our offense very often. That's us as much as it is them. Bojan Bogdanovic was 1 of 9. Jordan Clarkson was 2 of 13. Rudy Gay was 4 for 12. I mean, that's a lot of empty possessions coming from normally more reliable players. But in the same way that we talk about, like, no style points. The Lakers coming off a terrible effort. I'm not talking about terrible result, terrible effort against the Nuggets on Saturday, played harder on Monday. They played cleaner on Monday. They played smarter on Monday, and they sort of honored the promise that they made of, like, okay, we won't do that again. I'm not saying we're going to win, but we won't do that again.
And look, along those lines of what you're talking about, Brian, like, Utah obviously gets challenged on shots all the time, and they do a better job making them go down. But at the same time, though, the Lakers played, I thought, attentive and energetic and focused enough defense that some of that credit actually does go to them.
Sure.
And this was beyond the effort piece of this, and this was something that was obviously talked about a lot after the Denver game, something that LeBron was asked about because, he'd sent out that tweet literally apologizing to Laker Nation, saying this wasn't going to happen again. And, this was, I think, in part spurred by Magic Johnson's tweet, which was just chef's kiss when it comes to just lacking self-awareness. Magic tweeting out that the Lakers essentially quit in this game, haven't been putting out the effort, and Jeannie Buss deserves better as the owner. I mean, that he does not recognize. He just described his own exit from the organization a few years ago. The thing about Magic that is just, he is so damn lovable. Nobody will ever. You can't stay mad at Magic.
The tweeting is so ridiculous and silly. These things are look, it is its own. It's genre, really.
It's a big reason that I'm not even joking when I say this. It is a big reason that he quit the job as president of basketball operations, because it got in the way of his tweeting, and a bird's got to fly, Brian.
Look, he to his credit, he did kind of add a little bit of stability and credibility to the Lakers, and once that was done, he needed to get back to the tweeting.
Yes,
the actual job of whatever president of basketball, whatever he was,
not his
wasn't
jam.
his jam. Like, that's really a grinding kind of job, and that was not that Magic doesn't grind a business. He does, but like that. Not in this one. This was more of a side gig.
But it was interesting though. LeBron, in talking about that, that tweet obviously got a lot of attention, as LeBron wanted. And he was asked, what he said to the team after that. And he said nothing. He's like, I didn't talk to them about this at all, because essentially talk can be cheap sometimes. You got to have actions. And I think all of these guys, I think they all recognize, like, we need to do better. We need to be more consistent. We need to play harder. We need to play more focused. We need to play smarter, all that stuff. But I think what they're starting to recognize, at least hopefully, and whether or not they are truly dedicated to this realization moving forward remains to be seen, is just the idea that it's going to be this way for the rest of the season. Even when Anthony Davis comes back, even if they hopefully keep everybody whole, who knows? Kendrick Nunn, unfortunately, we're going to get into this, had a setback. Frank Vogel told us before the game. He is back to having no timeline. His knee apparently did not respond well to the ramped up workouts, and obviously this is not a good sign.
Neither is mine of late, just for people who are keeping track.
It feels, Brian, very shades of Aaron McKee in 2006. An older version Aaron was than Kendrick Nunn, but they brought him in to be the starting point guard on a mid-level exception, and Aaron McKee played like 9 games over 2 seasons. It's feeling like that, but just even when AD is back, like, this is something they are going to have to be dedicated towards.
The idea that they're going to, I think it's like you're saying, like, they're starting to understand that it's not like, when the playoffs come around, we got to play playoff level hard. The level of hard that they have to play at to win game 44 in February, and in January, and in February and into like the level of hard that they have to produce for games like that is just higher than I think they were expecting coming into the season. As a team that sort of expected to be able to build and pace themselves as championship teams do through 82 games.
And before we go to break, I just think there's an idea of, do you want it bad enough? Like with this, and like I don't mean it like in a like a Gatorade commercial type of way. Like, is it in you? I mean, just like literally, do you want this bad enough to go after it, knowing that a lot of times you will put out that effort, and it may not be enough because right now they're behind the pack. So you have to do this anyway, even if it's not always going to give you the results, even if it feels sort of beneath the goals that you had set for yourself. Do you want it that bad? Even if it doesn't help, still got to do it.
We'll get into some of these medical updates. Again, Kendrick Nunn, what that does, certainly the update that was given on Anthony Davis by Frank Vogel after the game. We'll make sure we get into that before the end of the show. But a little bit more on tonight's game. Obviously, people are going to remember the Russell Westbrook dunk over Rudy Gobert. That thing flew around the internet. There was another Russell Westbrook moment, though, that got a lot of attention. That was also significant, I think, for this team and also for the kind of the mentality and the attitude of the team. It's something you asked Frank Vogel about after game, and we'll do that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Prize Picks. Okay, Laker fans, you've been hearing me tell you about Prize Picks for months. Have you signed up yet? If not, why not, dummy? Because Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. If you haven't checked it out yet, you are missing out. You're going to love this app for NBA and mixed sports pick'em. Prize Picks has the best NBA DFS prop game on the market. They offer more NBA props than any other DFS prop operator and offers all the superstar players as well as bench players that only record a handful of minutes each game. Plus, and this is the fun part, Prize Picks allows mixed sports entries. Like you could take the over for Anthony Davis rebounds with the under on Matt Stafford completions. Just parlay that together, have fun, keep it weird, keep it interesting. Use the award-winning app on both the App Store or the Google Play. Entries are made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. Prize Picks, safe, fast withdrawals. So go to prizepicks.com right now. Use the promo code NBA or go to the App Store, download the app. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Again, if you are not playing Prize Picks, you don't know what you're missing.
Okay, so we'll get to the Russell Westbrook dunk here in a second, which was, I think, a significant moment, but more for Russell Westbrook than necessarily how it impacted the arc of the game in its totality. When you think about the team, Andy, there was another moment in the game where a courtside fan spilled his drink, and actually Donovan Mitchell, Utah Jazz star, kind of slipped on it, and Russ came over and like grabbed the mop and started mopping it up. And it was like, it was like a fun kind of lighthearted, humorous moment in a season for the Lakers that has had precious few of those. You actually specifically asked Frank Vogel about that moment after the game. And it sounded to me like Vogel was actually very pleased that you did.
Yeah, I asked him basically just if this felt like a reminder that as much as the focus heading into this game was guys need to be playing harder, there needs to be more effort, all that stuff that's really serious. Like, you need to have fun. Like at this job or any job, like it's important to be having fun. And this season has had very few instances of fun, precious few. And just did this serve as a reminder of that? And he said, yeah, absolutely. And he did not think that this was just like an incidental moment that had nothing to
moment
do.
of significance.
Yeah, like that had nothing to do with the game itself. And just like, a reminder that this is something that all you guys love to do. Like you are out here doing this thing that you dedicated your whole life to, and yes, it's a job. And like any other job, there will be times where you don't feel up for it, times where it doesn't feel fun. But at the same time, like this is your passion and you got to find the fun in it again, even as things this season have been incredibly difficult and challenging. Just Russ, who is one of the leaders of this team, one of the more focal points of this team. He's certainly somebody that gets a lot of attention, positive or negative. I think, I don't know if Russ, I didn't get a chance to ask him about this. I don't know if Russ would ever break it down, sort of that intentionally, but it wouldn't shock me if Russ recognized, like, gotta laugh.
Yeah, but he
Gotta have
was
some
asked
fun.
about it, and he's like, "Yeah, it was fun. You were having a little fun. It's funny." Like, you didn't ask specifically, he wasn't asked specifically in the context of like, "Do you guys need to be happy?" But like, he laughed and smiled at it, and I think recognized, like, you got it, like what you're talking about there, because it's not just a matter of remembering it's your passion. Remember, it's like when the expectations for a team like this are as high as they are, and the level of disappointment is as tangibly elevated as it is now. I mean, even with this win, and there's it's a big difference between being 21 and 23 and 22 and 22 with a winnable game against Indiana on Wednesday. um Even with that, Andy, like the level of disappointment is incredibly high, and the players are certainly aware of it. When you operate under those conditions, you don't play as well. Everybody starts to feel like either they got to do more themselves, or you start to get discouraged. Or when you're having fun, when guys are enjoying the environment, when you feel like good things can happen, when you can feel like you can enjoy yourself, you're a little bit looser. You make that extra pass, you cut a little more. It's like you talked about, it's like anybody else's job. You have a little more bounce in what you do, a little more happiness to be there. It makes a difference. And moments like that can stack up in the same way that ugly moments stack up. Want to ask you though about Westbrook and the dunk over Gobert, because statistically speaking, this wasn't a refrigerator game for Russ, where he's going to take the box score and put it up on the fridge. 15 points, 5 of 14 from the floor, 8 rebounds, only 3 assists, 2 turnovers, so not too bad there. But this dunk over Rudy Gobert, he let out some primal screaming after that and was moving. Like, the projection I think that Russ had in terms of just being able to get up and burst and finish like that, when all we've talked about for the last, I don't know, month is how Russ can't finish at the rim. He said afterwards it wasn't a significant play, didn't feel any different to me. I do not believe him for a heartbeat.
Okay, first of all, like, it cannot be overstated how much of a holy bleep dunk this was.
It was awesome.
Put aside how much you think it actually, affected the game, tone setter, all that stuff. And I think there are elements of it that carried over in the second half, if not necessarily directly. But in terms of quality dunks, I would say even matched against the standard of Russ's past as a dunker. Awesome. This was incredible. Like, he effing disintegrated Rudy Gobert.
But I mean, like he elevated, and like the burst and all this stuff, you really been wondering like where it is. All of a sudden, it was like all back in one play.
I mean, this thing was freaking nasty, and he got up so quickly and threw it down so emphatically. I mean, like he left Rudy Gobert like as a pile of dust. Like, this is one of the premier, not just defensive players in the year, one of the in the league. This is one of the premier rim protectors in the league. And he destroyed Gobert, him.
I know he said it wasn't any different, wasn't a special moment, didn't mean it. I just don't believe him. I think when you have been, and you watch the reaction that he had to the play, and the way he was moving and talking and jawing after that, and looking at the crowd and all these other things. He was asked after the game, do you think people just didn't think you had that left in you? And he's like, that's a people problem, not a me problem.
Yeah, but that, by the way, is the tell that he's lying.
Right, exactly. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, it is very clear. Like, the idea that Russell Westbrook's confidence would be shaken is something that's sort of unnerving to people, because he just seems so confident in everything he does, from how he plays to how he dresses to all these other things. But it's very clear, like, this is an experience for him, what he's gone through offensively, finishing at the rim, the inability to score, the inability to make shots that and so to remind yourself as a player that you still have that there. Again, it didn't lead to some sort of great statistical outburst where Westbrook just annihilated the Jazz in the second half. He had 15 points. He missed 9 of his 14 shots. But I guarantee you that moment meant something for him. Let's get to AD and some of the stuff coming up there, because the potential return of Anthony Davis is going to have a significant impact on the rotation. Guys like Stanley Johnson, who was amazeballs in the fourth quarter. Trevor Ariza, the trickle down here is pretty significant. So we'll do all that next.
Locked On Lakers, brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline wants to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue the march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action in 2022. It's a new year and a new updated desktop and mobile website. To sign up today, receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON to get started. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC, right down to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline, the fastest, easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the games start.
So after the game, Andy, Frank Vogel was asked about Anthony Davis, that 4-week checkup that we were all promised. And while the details were still vague, there is no timeline. There will never be a timeline, ever a time that he could be standing on the court, ready to come back in and play. And Frank Vogel will not cop to him being available for that game. But they said that the pictures that they took were all clean, and that he has been cleared for an on-court ramp-up. That includes contact. And so Woj over the weekend and some other people reported that the Lakers were hopeful that he would be able to be back by the end of the month. This is monumentally significant that they are able to get him back with a few games, for me at least, with a few games to play before the trade deadline, because they need to know what they got. They need to know what Davis can bring them, how it's going to impact the rotation, what kind of player if they're going to sacrifice THT, Kendrick Nunn in the pick, what is the thing that they need to get back the most? Like, if this had bled more deeper into February, knock on wood, it won't. It would be really harmful for the Lakers. So to hear he can get on the court and do some contact is a really encouraging sign.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's going to be very difficult to move Kendrick Nunn. It's appearing quite unlikely that he is going to be available after the trade deadline. At least
for a team that wants to be able to use him for something.
Right, exactly. But what that does though is narrow down your options. I mean, unfortunately, I'm concerned, for the Lakers and frankly for Kendrick himself, that he may not be able to play this season. Like I'm growing increasingly concerned about that. But you mentioned with AD, the fact that Vogel was willing to be this outwardly positive, I took as an extremely good sign, because both the organization and Vogel specifically tend to keep their cards exceptionally close to the vest. They put out to a lot of media people, maddening updates that don't really give you much of anything concrete, which makes it harder to report this stuff out. But it's neither here nor there, and I understand why the organization does it. But the idea that Vogel
learned their lesson after Lonzo Ball. Like Lonzo Ball will be back in 2 weeks. Look, 6 months later, we're Lonzo Ball.
I get why it irritates some media members. To be perfectly honest, it doesn't really affect you and I in terms of what we do.
It really bothers fans. Fans get really upset.
Sure. And again, I get all that. I'm not saying that they shouldn't feel that way. My larger point being, though, that Vogel was willing to even sound like, be interpreted like this could be coming relatively soon, Anthony Davis on the court, makes me feel like they are pretty confident. And again, it matches up with that reporting that might not be too long.
Yeah, so somewhere near the end of the month, which would give them 3 or 4 games to play before the deadline at least. And the impact in terms of trying to figure out what they have is important, because if they are going to go to, they did not go small against the Jazz, because you can't have LeBron lining up against Rudy Gobert all night.
No, they actually went bigger, not just with Dwight Howard starting, but starting Ariza.
With Trevor Ariza, and generally played bigger over the course of the evening.
Yeah.
But if the identity that they're going to try to get is, with that AD as the starting center, LeBron as the backup center, and doing that, they need to see what's going on, because a guy like Stanley Johnson is, his fourth quarter against the Jazz notwithstanding, in which he scored most of his 15 points and was dynamite, had a couple great assists and offensive rebounds and all that kind of stuff. He is a player who you do kind of need to put the right guys around him, because he is not He's certainly not a floor spreader. And while he can put the ball on the floor a little bit, he's generally over the course of his career been an offensive negative. You know, a guy like Austin Reeves, who was great, I thought, against the Jazz, doing Austin Reeves stuff, is going to need his 20 to 25 minutes. You know, the team is going to need his 20 to 20. There's the squeeze. You know, Carmelo Anthony's going to come back, you know, reasonably soon, hopefully. You know, the squeeze is going to, we've talked about this a lot. The squeeze is going to be on for a lot of players around the rotation and the roster. I am fascinated by how this is going to play out and who isn't going to end up getting a lot of court time.
Yeah, I think we can get into a little bit more detail with that and some speculation for Wednesday's show.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's something we want to give a little bit more thought to and start thinking about some of these machinations. I thought it was really interesting, though, hearing Stanley Johnson, who got his third, technically, because the hardship setups this year, third 10-day contract. This is the last one the Lakers can sign him to before signing him for the rest of the season, or he becomes an unrestricted free agent.
I feel like after 3, you should be like, the Lakers should be able to sign him to like a 14-day contract or a 6-day contract. They should just it unlocked some weird rule. We can now just name our number.
But, you know, we've both been saying for a while, we would be very surprised if he's not with the team for the rest of the season. I thought it was really interesting hearing him talk about the game, about tonight's game, and sort of like this season and what it's been like for him. Because, you know, Stanley Johnson was, I believe, an 8th overall pick. Mm-hmm. He's only 25, but he has spent a lot of time for a top 10 pick in the league just fighting to stay in the NBA. And, you know, this is the most I've ever heard Stanley Johnson talk. I remember interviewing him a little bit when he was a rookie, but since then it's been a long time. He's a really bright, introspective guy who is just really refreshing to hear talk, period. But it's been really interesting hearing him talk about how he's come to recognize the importance of energy and just providing energy with the hopes that it can be contagious. You know, not just recognizing the value of that for a team, but also, too, I think recognizing the necessity of having to do that for yourself, which can't be easy to wrap your head around when you were drafted as somebody.
I was about to say, when you're the number 8 pick, when you're a top 10 guy like that.
Yeah, I mean, you're drafted as somebody that people are thinking about as an all-star. I remember you and I were around Stanley for something during his rookie season for an outside project, but both of us marveled at how he showed up in the NBA looking like an NBA player, just physically. Like,
he was 19,
a lot of these guys.
He was 19 when he came to the NBA and had like a 32-year-old man's body. It was like,
yeah, I mean,
insane.
Like, skinny Kobe showed up and had to fill out and stuff like that. Like, even LeBron, as much of a specimen as that dude was straight out of high school, like, there was still filling out and things like that. Like,
Stanley Johnson had what we would call a trunk.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
He had an impressive trunk. But what I was thinking the whole time that you were talking, we're both kind of just thinking about contextualizing what it is to be Stanley Johnson. It's a reminder to me of just how good these guys are. And when you get to the NBA level, like, Stanley Johnson sucks. You know, this is his 4th or 5th NBA team. He's 25 years old. Yeah, Detroit, Pelicans, 4th team, Toronto, and the Lakers. You know, but that's a lot for a guy who was drafted 8th and is only 25. You know, he has never averaged 10 points a game. He's been a big disappointment. And all this, people, the average fan looks at Stanley Johnson and say, that guy sucks. I mean, he is so monumentally good at basketball. But the problem is, all of a sudden it's like, where the hell did Austin Reeves come from? And that guy, this like the dudes who miss, or the guys who can't quite, make that adjustment from being a frontline star to, I got to find a role for myself. And it's easier for Austin Reeves to do that, or Alex Caruso, or guys who have to fight their way into the league, probably fight their way into college, than it is for somebody like Stanley Johnson, who was one of the best high school players of the recent memory in LA. So it is so hard. It is so hard to be good and to stay in this league. And I have an enormous amount of respect for somebody like Johnson, who is able to kind of go to that place and take the ego out of it I'm not saying that was the problem before, but like, obviously that's got to happen at some point. And just be like, I got to do whatever the hell I can to stay in the league. And if it means I'm diving on the floor and I score 4 points a game and everybody thinks I'm a lottery washout, whatever, I'm still here.
Yeah.
And I that to me is really impressive.
Yeah. I mean,
same kind of reason I'm excited about Malik Monk, by the way, but like just the bet that guys make on themselves sometimes. I mean, you want them to succeed.
You and I covered Kwame Brown. We both really liked Kwame a lot. And, one of the things I had talked to him about, like the idea that he had to let go of, I'm a number 1 overall pick, and the pressure of that, and just like the idea of meeting those expectations. He came to realize I never will. I just have to figure out what I do well. And, to certain degrees, Kwame did. But either way, Kwame had like a 12-year career.
Yeah, I'm thinking exactly the same thing, literally looking it all up on Basketball Reference.
Yeah, I mean, he had like a 12-year career. That's incredibly successful.
12-year career, made
like $64
million.
Yeah. I mean,
at least and it may not be fully updated.
And he is considered, to be one of the biggest disappointments of recent NBA history. For anybody else in damn near any other line of work, you would be considered like the most successful person anybody will ever meet.
He's a meme. Yeah. But if he's drafted 3rd or drafted 2nd,
yeah,
it's total. People don't even remember it. There's so many guys that come and go in drafts, but because he was Kwame Brown, drafted number 1 by Michael Jordan, and has Stephen A. Smith going, Kwame Brown, like that's it. And so so Stanley Johnson, like you gotta be able to ignore all the people saying that you suck because you haven't met expectations and never will as a number 8 pick. But goddamn, he's going to try to stay in the league. And that is in and of itself an incredible accomplishment. So a lot more to talk about in terms of what the Lakers are going to be doing going forward as we creep closer to the trade deadline. Taylor Horton-Tucker is available to be traded. We did pass that milestone this weekend, not an insignificant one. And so we'll get into that, some of the lineup stuff, and look forward to Wednesday's game and a long road stretch for the Lakers coming up. All that on Wednesday's Locked On, right? Wednesday's Locked On Lakers. We'll do that. Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks.